Good morning, everybody. Happy Memorial Day to you on this Monday, May 26, 2025. I normally have all of your stories for your rush hour ride to work, although if you're in the United States, you are most likely on holiday, taking the day off. Although we have an audience all over the place, so I'm here to give you guys content. We will discuss Memorial Day. Along with that, I'm going to be talking about a few things we don't normally talk about on the show, a little bit of the meta-analysis of the rush hour, covering social media manager. I've got one, what I'm paying them, how much the channel has made. We'll discuss that, plus a Justin versus Blake overview. I will talk about the trial. Nothing really new to break, although we will talk a little bit about the questions people have about the judge having connections to Ryan Reynolds, so we'll get into that. And then we'll talk about a possible stand-up tour this fall and what's coming up next for the show. So again, a lot of meta-analysis coming to you today. And all of this and more, it's starting right now on The Rush. Now, you might be thinking, Dave, is this a way to just mail in an episode? Well, no, not exactly. I'm not trying to mail an episode in. I just like to find these moments where the news is a little bit quieter to sort of sneak in for the real loyal audience some updates of what's going on. If you're a part of our Patreon community, you probably know a lot of this, but publicly on the Rush Hour, we don't really discuss too much about the growth. So for those reasons, I did want to talk about that. But first, let's give a quick respect to Memorial Day. For those that are outside of the United States, we celebrate Memorial Day with barbecues, and it's the first sort of unofficial day of summer. But really, what is the holiday? And I got to read this definition so I don't butcher anything for you. It is the holiday where we honor and mourn the U.S. military personnel who died while serving in the United States Armed Forces. It is observed on the last Monday of May, and that's where we are today. And can you believe May went by so fast? I mean, my birthday's May 1st, turned 40. The first thing I did on my birthday, the first thing was hurt my shoulder. Are you kidding me? I was literally taking my shirt off, and I felt like my shoulder snapped. And in hindsight, I think I hurt it, not just because I'm getting old, but because, you hold your baby in weird positions. It messes up your neck, your shoulder, your back, your crack, all those other things. But in this case, it feels better now. I'm making a speedy recovery. So I think it was more of a nerve issue than an actual tear. But either way, I would be the saddest character in the new Magic Mike movie if they hired me. I would just be underhanding my shirt to the girl in the front row. Well, Memorial Day, now this doesn't really apply to me so much, but, to get personal, my father passed away, over a decade now, and I had a short-lived and very lacking relationship. That being, I never met him till I was 19, and he served in the Army, and he did multiple tours in Vietnam, and he had injuries in battle, but he didn't die till well after he served. So maybe Memorial Day isn't so much for him, but I like to think of our service members, and it ties into some of the conversations we have about politics, which can be very personal to people, which I understand. They always say, at dinner gatherings and family events, don't talk about politics or religion. They're so divisive. They're so ingrained. Yet on the podcast, I owe it to you to speak as if I'm speaking to a close friend. That's what makes the show do well. I have to be an open book about as much as I possibly can be an open book about. And this idea, so like when you look at something like Vietnam, right? It's decades, half a century ago, right? And then some, about that. When you look at this war, you remember that everybody, at least there was a lot of protests at the time of the war, and yet a lot of the service members would come back and not really feel like they had a place at home because people were disgusted by their government's actions. And I think of that because I think of some of the things that are going on abroad, including with our military, including with our government's leaders, like wars that we might be a part of that we disagree with, innocent lives and collateral damage that's hurt by them. And it's just a reminder, criticizing the powers that be is not a criticism of our government or another government's people, right? In the case of the war in Gaza, the Jewish people, it's not a criticism of them if you're criticizing their government. And yet it is so personal that we take it that way. I'm going to talk more about this when I get through the social media stuff. So stick with me as I do a through line here. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to notice we're not cutting away to anything. Normally, my podcasts, I cut away to multimedia and show different TikToks and things like that, which I really like to do. But in this case, on Memorial Day, we're just going straight forward and giving you guys a solid, tight 2025. Now, I hired a social media manager. I want to talk about the pros of it and the cons. There are no cons, in case she's watching, Danielle, shout out to you. There are no cons from a creative level. She's been fantastic. How it works is I've been really hesitating to hire somebody because you never know when your next paycheck is coming. You really don't when you do what I do. Every month I get a direct deposit from Google and one from SiriusXM, and I get one from Patreon, and I get one from my ad buying company. And you just hope that the more people watch them, that the money comes in. There's no contract for long term, like I got this amount. So the idea of hiring a social media person has been scary. But boy, shit or get off the pot. I've talked about it for so long that finally somebody approached me and said, hey, let's give this a shot. And I said, you know what, let's do it. So we did a 6-week trial, month and a half trial. It went by so fast. In those 6 weeks, the pay rate was $20 an hour, 15 hours. I'm trying to do the math there, $15 an hour. So $300 a week, not full time, but like enough that it's a risk to see, like, are we going to, I don't expect a return in some sort of monetary way, but I really want to grow my Instagram, my TikTok, because I firmly believe that investing the money into growing social media grows the audio, grows the video, grows people coming to shows and things like that. It's like, when you're a content creator, you have to sort of attack as many different angles as you can. Now, the problem is, as you guys know, it's probably hard enough to consume all of my content. Imagine creating it. So I usually make my morning episode the night before, and then during that day, I make my afternoon one. And there is no time to be putting reels out and TikToks and this and that. I mean, there are some days I'm up till 3 a.m. trying to wonder how I'm going to do all of this. So I said, you know what? I got to hire somebody else. And Danielle's been fantastic. I'm just going to spitball on the numbers. I think TikTok has almost doubled in size. I think Instagram has probably grown 50%. And what we noticed, which was crazy, was that one video took off on YouTube, made about $150, which again, I didn't expect to make any money. I'm still in the hole, but I was shocked that a short on YouTube would make money. And then something crazy happened. We got into the monetization program on TikTok, which you have to have 10,000 followers. So we got to that. And I didn't even consider this when I hired her. But one day on TikTok, we had an All-American Rejects video go viral, and it got $453. Now, since then, and I'll give you guys updates as they come, and I'm not saying this to be braggadocious. I'm saying this, to encourage anybody to get in the game if you have any desire to create content, right? Because I had never imagined a revenue stream coming from short form content. You know me, I make long form content. People call it too wordy, whatever. I do it the best I can. Twice a day. That's all I can do. Try not to apologize and give you my thoughts as cleanly as possible. I know. You think it's hard to follow? Imagine my brain. Imagine my wife's. Pray for her. So anyhow, $453. And then the next 4 days, it has made a penny. And I honestly don't know if it's going to start making serious money or if it was like an anomaly that it made a lot one day and then the next it's not. I have no idea, but I'll keep you guys posted. But I was thinking, dang, this is crazy. They always say this, like the more abundance that comes, the more abundance that comes, right? And I remember for years not making a penny. And then I remember making 50 cents or $1. You'd make $1 a video and you go, oh, this is crazy, because you're contextualizing, oh my gosh, I made a few bucks, but YouTube doesn't pay you until you get to that first $100. So you could be at $75, but they're not going to cut the check. They're not going to direct deposit it to you until you get to that 100. And you're just like, a couple months go by, you finally get to the $100, and then $100 comes into your bank account and you're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. This is direct deposit. You watch it. And then 1 month, $35,000 comes in. And you're like, oh my gosh. And then on the 21st of the month of 3 weeks later, when the month's over, you check your bank account and you're like, oh my, this is life-changing. Like life-changing things are happening. And it's hard to contextualize all of it because for those that find me right now, they go, Dave, you're just some long-haired douchebag bragging about this. But for those that have been around for over 4 years now, the tears, the blood, the sweat that went into the minimum wage jobs, editing videos on my lunch break. Literally, I remember tell the story all the time. The Super Bowl where Shakira was shaking her butt with, I believe, J-Lo. That Super Bowl. I watched it from a chicken wing, I think it was called Wingstop, a chicken wing company, on my lunch break at a minimum wage job. We worked for tips, but on a rainy day like today, you didn't get paid much. I remember watching the halftime show of the Super Bowl on my phone going, something has to change. And change it did. During the pandemic, as I was relieved of my job and had nothing else going on, things finally started to take off. And I threw gasoline on that metaphorical fire. And I pushed really, really hard to try to make, every viral moment count. Now, that doesn't mean I was doing or talking about things that weren't important to me. I've always said this as a comic. If you're going to just tell the audience what they want to hear, that's hack. And you have to fight to not be hack. You have to fight. And then the alternative of not being hack is cracking an egg to make an omelet, right? Simple, stupid metaphors. Well, that's come up lately with this war in Gaza and this idea that there are innocent people that are dying at crazy rates. And then you hear pushback from people saying, well, this is happening in Yemen and this is happening in Sudan and of course in Ukraine. And it's like, well, yes, there are a lot of issues in our world. But one thing I'm trying to do with an audience I've grown and that has found me and that has stuck around is to give people my honest thoughts on something. And biting your tongue when you see what's going on and not addressing it, that is something I never want to be accused of doing. Now, early on with this war, a tragic war where a terrorist organization, Hamas, is still holding, 50, 60, dozens and dozens of innocent lives. So there are absolutely innocent victims on either side of this. In fact, the Jewish people, there's so many suffering because of what their government is doing, right? So it's important to understand, and we'll cover this later. Bernie Sanders, Jewish American, talks about this extensively, that the anti-Semitism that's coming, so much of it goes back to the fact that their government is doing things that are unfathomable, barely letting aid into Gaza as they bomb, bombs on top of bombs, rubble, the entire population. And they plan to move out several million people and doing it with United States. And so it's like, why is this important to us? Well, it's our tax dollars in part that are funding this. It's a big deal. And so I bring this back to social media because I feel like people that find my show have a general idea where they either trust my perspective or you might disagree with me, but I've got the right intention and whatnot. But because I've now been doing social media, it's brought some money in, although I'm in the red. What's costing me, I upped my social media person from $300 to $500 a week because we've increased their hours because we're happy to see that there's growth, but it's still losing money. I'm still losing money on that, but in a way where it's a good business expense. But the interesting and very tragic response to that I've seen is now that my reels get published to Instagram, they're also getting published to Facebook. These 30-second to 3-minute clips are being seen by people that don't follow my content. People I went to college with 20 years ago, a guy I did a sketch comedy with, a guy I was in a film with or stand-up show with. And the vitriol that has come out from me sharing my honest thoughts on what's going on in Gaza, on that war, on what's going on politically with the biggest grift happening in the world. With that, I mean the Trump coin, where he's made 40% of his net worth. This guy who's late 70s, his entire life, he's been trying to amass as much wealth as possible. And in the last 3 months, he has made 40% of that entire net worth on one Trump coin, right? The Trump coin, crypto scam, that is what it is, right? And so you discuss this, and people that wouldn't normally fuck with what I'm covering are chiming in on Facebook. It goes to show you how toxic short form content can be, because you can't possibly get a full story. There's this one guy, he was in my fraternity, a couple years younger, didn't know him. He's posting these whack ass responses to my short form content. Having never watched my podcast, having never heard, a general scope of all the different things I talk about. And on another case, there's a guy I played baseball with 20 plus years ago. I'm getting old. I played baseball with this guy in a summer league in high school, and he's on the different side of things and he's commenting left and right. And it's like, hey, I'm like, hey buddy, I'm glad you're paying my bills by commenting on these things. But how weird. Somebody I played baseball with. And that's what Facebook is, right? It keeps relationships tangentially close that would never have lasted this long, right? People are there for a season of your life. They come, they go. But Facebook keeps them close enough to which if somebody wants to fight back on something you say, next thing you know, it's going back and forth online. And that's absolutely ridiculous. So we had somebody called me out for the way I reported the UN story. Right, the UN reported that 14,000 babies would die within 48 hours if we didn't get aid into the country. Now, that story turned out to be wrong, and we retracted it and deleted the reels that were associated with that. Well, that's just not enough for some people. They say, oh, you're sharing all this fake news. It's like, first of all, that news story came from ABC News, and everybody, from the UN to major news picked that story up. So if that's the type of story you're not allowed to cover, then my job is done. I have nothing left to talk about. So the point of what I'm trying to say is, and maybe some people this will resonate with, and maybe some people this is just way too sloppy. I'm not really sure. Leave me a comment on my Instagram and let me know, because I'll do more of these free formed videos if you like them, but for some people, maybe this isn't it. But what I learned was it's a necessary evil for me in the short form to make these reels and spread them out to people and get my message on as many platforms as possible. But the harm that it causes is getting mischaracterized by people that might only hear 30 seconds to 3 minutes of what you have to say. Those people saying, oh, you're praying for the innocent lives in Gaza. What about this? And you go, well, I've been talking about this other stuff for years. I've been talking about the war in Ukraine since, when it started, when it was 3-4 years ago, a long time, 3 years ago. So that's why podcasting and long form YouTube videos are better, because we have the ability to talk about things in a much more, I don't even want to say nuanced way, but in a good faith way that on short form you just can't possibly get. I used to say back in the day, nobody got canceled from podcasts because you'd listen to what someone had to say and you wouldn't take it out of context. But people would get canceled from tweets and short form things because it was so easy to see that bite-sized thing and mold it and frame it into your perspective that would be like, oh, can you believe that it would get rid of the tone. But now with short form content, what is said on a podcast will be clipped down and then misused. So I just encourage anybody who's absorbing any content whatsoever, get to the source and get to the extent of the full conversation. That's the best thing we can do, right? Now, when it comes to Justin and Blake, we're going to get into this. When it comes to Justin Baldoni versus Blake Lively, what's been interesting with this story as we've covered it is this story is a perfect cue for critical thinking. It's a perfect cue for who's listening and watching and reading all the evidence and looking at both sides and using their intuition. And in most cases, those that side with Justin Baldoni are those that have seen Blake Lively's accusations, probably sided with her at the beginning because they're like, damn, including myself, you're like, geez, this is rough. He's walking in on her, breastfeeding, he's kissing her when he's not supposed to. He's hiring his buddies to, be the gynecologist. He's all these crazy things, right? And then you hear his side. And each one of her wild accusations is met with a reasonable response. And her accusations then don't come with any real evidence. They don't come with smoking gun text messages to her husband or to her best friend or all these other things. And you're quickly going, oh, I think I was bamboozled by one side of the story. Now, what's interesting with covering Justin versus Blake is there are plenty of people whom disagree with my political thoughts, my thoughts on the different wars going on, my thoughts on the grifting, but they're able to. And the question you guys can ask as an audience is, who's in the right and who's in the wrong? But my challenge is, for those that appreciate my nuance and my take on Blake versus Justin or Clayton versus Laura or whatever other stories I've covered, but don't like my take on politics. It's like, I get it. We can all disagree on different things. But what's interesting is the political indoctrination that we all have, the bias that we all have, the belief that we're pro this or anti that or whatever it is, goes way longer than the Justin versus Blake case, right? The Justin versus Blake case goes back a year. It goes back to, she said this here, they were acting weird then, she wrote her, her complaint, his response, bop, 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 bop. So we're able to sort of untangle those Christmas tree lights way easier on this case than we are politically. Because any criticism of Trump, you could then look at the Democratic Party, Sleepy Joe, goes back to here. And I agree with all of that. I agree with all of the criticisms that are out there. You need to be able to look at all sides and criticize all things fairly. But I think what inevitably will happen with Justin versus Blake is that people will that come to the party late will see Justin Baldoni fans, stands, supporters, whatever they're called, and they will accuse them of being on one side because of X, Y, and Z. We saw this with Taylor Lorenz, right? I interviewed her, got a lot of shit for it, although I stand by my interview. I think it was perfectly reasonable. But what we saw with that interview is this assumption that you have to be conservative to think that Blake Lively's full of shit, or you have to be this or that. And I just reject that. And we have to continue to reject these generalizations, right? In Justin versus Blake, we saw people from all different political ideologies come together and say, I'm smelling bullshit on her. And that shouldn't take away from larger movements. If you want to be a part of a larger movement that wants women to be believed when they come forward with accusations of issues of harassment and whatnot, whether it's workplace or whatever the case may be, you want to make sure that those that end up not having or, presenting the evidence, like in Blake's case, she hasn't presented any evidence to back up any of her claims. You should want to expose that to clear a path for the actual victims, almost like a plow, plow those stories out of the way, call them rubbish, the Jussie Smollett's, the fake victim stories, get them out of the way, because there still needs to be a path for real victims. So I reject the idea that hurts the cause. I think generalizations are tough. And I think with the generalization of believe women was turned into believe all women by sinister, motivated people. Because I think a lot of people that deal with culture war issues, they want, and I'm being careful with my words here, because it's not necessarily one side of the political aisle versus the other, but those that want to sort of generalize everybody into one direction will then find they'll then find the situation that speaks out against the average. So in this case, it would be, well, some people lie. Yeah, of course, no shit, some people lie. Yeah, so the idea of believing people doesn't reject the idea that someone will lie. It says, let's just believe people, then present the evidence. But what we have to remember when we believe people is you have to find a way, and this is what grace is, you have to find a way to believe people while also not letting there be collateral damage to somebody else's career or livelihood until it plays out through the proper system. And so it would have been fine if people believed Blake Lively while also not canceling Justin and letting room for the truth to come out, which is where we are right now because this thing's going to court. Same thing with Laura Owens versus Clayton Echard. Believe her, sure. Yeah, she says she's pregnant with it, sure. But don't destroy Clayton and give him a chance to offer his response. Now, in both of those cases, people that initially believed the woman, just because they both happen to be women here, ended up switching sides because most people are reasonable. So anyhow, all that to say, I find the case fascinating, and I also find that the sort of issue that I've had to overcome is being okay being disliked by some. Covering Clayton Echard, it's approaching the 1 year anniversary of a good friend blasting me, someone who no longer is my friend, no longer talks to me, all because I was going hard for the truth in a story where the truth wasn't getting the light it deserved and needed for it to come. And that truth involved me. I basically, with the Clayton story, had to provide the truth selfishly to cover my own ass because I was being threatened with multi-$100 million lawsuits. So I have had to be okay with losing people in my life with the danger that I'm telling you how I actually feel about something. We've all been in relationships where you have a hard time saying what you feel about something because you know the consequence is going to be that it either offends somebody else or it's not what they want to hear. And listen, there's plenty of times in the relationship you just bite your tongue because you might be in a conversation where the truth isn't going to help you because moods are heightened or there's stress or whatnot. And it's like, okay, let's just calm down. But in the end, you have to speak the truth. And if I believe I'm witnessing a genocide play out, I need to talk about that selfishly because I will not, as a content creator, as a comedian, as someone who gets into the line of work that I do to speak the truth, I will not live in regret that when I educated myself on certain issues, that I stayed quiet. And I think the easy subconscious thing to do is to not educate yourself so that you don't know what's going on, so that you don't have to pick a side. I stand by a side I think is very reasonable, which is that innocent lives, don't get killed, that innocent lives don't starve, that people have a chance to pursue life where they're happy, where they can laugh and hug their parents, and where their parents can see the joy of seeing their kid being raised. I think I've always had that grace within me, but I think being a father now, that I see that and empathize with every situation where there is a child in distress or a family in need. It breaks my heart. And I can't donate to every GoFundMe, and I can't solve those problems by cutting a check. But what I can do is talk about them and try to talk about a formula we can all try to live by that decreases collateral damage while we seek the truth and not judging people who might not be there at the finish line that we think we're at. If somebody is anti-gay marriage and you want to say, oh, F them, leave room for them to find that love where they can see two same-sex people holding hands, dancing, or even, kissing in the rain, or whatever the case is. Like, leave room for that, because if you operate from a place of love in that higher frequency, I hope that others will see that. It's like the 12-step program, right? They always say this, I'm not in the 12-step program, although I have gone to Codependence Anonymous meetings. But they do say, you don't tell people why they should go to the 12-step program. You live a life that is so desirable that people come to you as a magnet and say, what can I do to have a life so light, so full of love, so full of abundance? And then when they come to you, you say, this is what I'm all about. And you know what? A lot of it's for agreements shit. Not taking offense to other people. It's extremely hard. I live with this every day. I get offended all the time, but trying not to. And knowing when you are being offended by someone else's actions, to dismiss it and say what they think about me is none of my business. That is hard to do in the modern age when you get tagged in atrocious stories or you get mischaracterized or whatnot. But I know this. I know that the greater amount of people that listen to my message and the message I share will appreciate my perspective because they know it's coming from a curious place where it is about pursuing that greater love. Like that's all I can say. So I'm out of time. I barely got into some of this stuff here. We'll have another afternoon episode where we'll cover some more. But as far as Justin versus Blake goes, that was just a little bit about the psychology of it all, whether it's talking about the atrocious wars or genocides going on in our world, talking about these behaviors where people might like you for one thing you say and hate you for another. Those that stick around don't stick around because they agree with me. It's because they understand sort of the tango, and the tone of what I'm saying comes from a place where it's not a grift. And we'll have to see with Justin versus Blake what comes next. But as of right now, I think I respect that most people, and I have faith that most people with their critical thinking skills are on the right side of this, which is Justin Baldoni's side. And if new information comes out, I expect people would change their minds. I really do. As far as stand-up tour goes, that's coming soon. I got a text message from another comedian that I signed up for his text messaging list, and he text messages straight to your phone when he's performing in certain towns. Would you guys like me to do that? Would you guys like it if I just put together a list where I'm not asking for anything, but because my problem with emails, and maybe this is an old millennial thing, you get so many emails, I don't even open them, but you open every text message. So that might be something I might sign up for. Let me know if you want that, because my goal this summer and fall is to hit up a lot more shows. I did a show last night that was so bad in front of a lot of people that did not want to see me perform. And I had two people in the front row that really liked it. And the rest were just like, they were there. It was like an all family clean show. And they were just like, I don't know. They did not like me, but I said, you know what? I made those two people laugh. They liked me. I think I can put together a room full of those two people and we can have a good time. And that's what I hope to do with the stand-up tour. So what's coming up next for me? Well, it was a tough week last week. It was a tough week for me. I made a few decisions for the direction of the podcast that, while you guys as an audience won't see the difference, are leading me to what I hope is more abundant opportunities for my family and for myself. But there were growing pains with it. There were growing pains. For those that follow me on Patreon, you got to see that. Part of what I want to address with myself is being a people pleaser, and it's tough. This past week was one of the few instances where I had to do what was right for my family and know that I was going to be making a move that was going to really disappoint some people, but it was business. And I don't need to get into the specifics of it other than to say it was such a reminder that I have a responsibility, not just to my audience, but the people I do business with. There's a responsibility as my channel has grown, as you guys have grown with me, to do the right thing and do what I need to do to make the show as good as possible. And some of that means trying to find new opportunities so that hopefully I can not just hire the social media person, but a producer in the future and people that can sort of help, I would say careen me. Is that the right word? Corral me? Maybe that's the right word. Corral me in my kind of way my brain spins into a focused direction so that I can be a better voice to those that choose to put me in your ear. Either way, I appreciate all of you. Memorial Day is a weird holiday indeed because we make it all about the hamburgers, but let's take a moment to not just honor those that we lost fighting in wars, but let's take a moment to really think about what those wars stood for. Not all of them were for greater good, and being critical of those wars and of those decisions made by our leaders is not a criticism of those that sacrifice. So we raise our glasses to those that have made a great sacrifice. And then we just hope that what we can do in our country and in the world is to put the right leaders in place so that those sacrifices are fewer and farther between and that they are for something greater and a better life for us and for our kids. We don't always live up to that, but that is sort of the goal, right? So for that reason, all the political fighting that exists on different short form content, I try to think of it and think, well, everyone's trying the best with the information they have, and we all want the same thing. I think most people want peace, security, safety, love, and I hope you guys get all of that today. I'll be back this afternoon. We'll see you then. I'm Dave, and this is The Rush.